Hey, Tori.
Hi, Dr. Wiley. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Pretty good.
As you say, it's a day of Zoom.
It is. It is a day of Zoom. Do you
Zoom.
only have two meetings or do you have more than two?
Oh, no. I've been
Oh,
since 8 a.m.
oh my goodness.
I know. Fortunately, I had one at 4 and it got canceled. So,
Oh, that's good. You can start your weekend a little earlier than expected.
yes, I can. Yeah, but looking forward to this.
Yeah. We have lots of good questions that people had to ask, so that's very good. Hey, Mac.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Trying to figure out the white balance in this room.
Oh. Are you at your house?
Yeah, my job over on campus ended on Wednesday, so I'm actually
Oh,
spending a little bit more time at home now.
nice. I'm sure that's refreshing. I know you've been super busy.
Yeah.
Right. Looks like we have a lot of people. Might wait just one more minute. Have a couple more joining in the wait room. All right. It looks like most everyone is here. Let's see, is Dr. Friedman with us?
I am.
Oh, yes, right there. Okay, great.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I had to scroll through the long list. I wasn't sure if you were there quite yet. All right, great. Well, I'll admit folks as they come in, but we'll go ahead and get started. I know many people are inundated with Zoom meetings on a Friday, so we want to make sure everyone gets out on time to either head into their next Zoom or start their nice October weekend. So welcome everyone. This is our second professionalization workshop of the semester, ins and outs of the department, empowering you to be a successful anthropology student. So this session will provide information on sort of the nuts and bolts of the PhD program, from coursework requirements and credits to how student assistantships are decided and allocated. This session will also discuss navigating the stages of the program, tapping into different helpful resources across campus, and really just making the most of your program and your time in the department. So for today's session, we have Dr. Andrea Wiley, Chair of Anthropology, and Dr. Sara Friedman, the Director of Graduate Studies, who will be giving some insight and clarification into the logistics and the structure of the department. And then we have PhD candidate Mackenzie Cory from Archaeology, who's going to be providing some advice from his personal experience navigating the program. So you have a little bit more of the macro level understanding of how the department works. And then we want to zoom in, narrow in to what does that look like on an everyday experiential level. And Mackenzie can walk us through some of his experiences there. So the first half hour of our session, each of our facilitators are going to take about 10 minutes to introduce themselves and their role in the department, and then share some information or advice from their point of view. The second half of the workshop will be focused on answering pre-submitted questions. So we have a good number of those. If you have questions during the time that our facilitators are discussing and providing information, I'll be moderating the chat. So if you need clarification on some of what they are talking about, you can drop a question in the chat and we'll make sure that that gets answered before their time is up. So we'll go ahead and get started with Dr. Andrea Wiley. So she'll discuss her role as chair, but then also touch on some topics like the department structure and AI funding decisions. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Wiley.
Great. Well, can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you. I know as first and second year students, you are just kind of getting the lay of the land and trying to figure out how this big institution works and how you can navigate through what is a complex bureaucracy, okay? And part of my role as chair is to help you do that. And I'll talk a little bit about how I do that. But I thought it might be helpful first for me to just talk a little bit about the structure of the institution, because we throw around names like the college, the campus, the university, and they're actually all different. And so it's important, I mean, I often get them mixed up sometimes as well, or I'll just use one when I really mean the other. But it's important to just recognize that these do have specific meanings. So if we talk about the university, that's referring to Indiana University, of which Bloomington is just one campus. It's the main campus, sometimes it's called the flagship campus, but it's just one of several, and there are regional or branch campuses too. The campus is then IU Bloomington. So if you hear about stuff happening on campus, that's really just referring to what's going on here on campus. Then there's the college, and the college is technically known as the College of Arts and Sciences, or COAS, sometimes just the college. And that includes most of the liberal arts and sciences. So the social, and it's got branches, there's the social sciences, there's the arts and humanities, and there's the natural sciences. Technically, anthropology is part of the social and historical sciences piece. We have an associate dean who we kind of report to, who's a layer between us and the dean of the college, who is Rick Van Kooten. And then there's the department.
What are you doing, Keiko?
Is someone talking to me? No, okay. So then there's the department. Again, we're one of multiple departments in the college. What's relevant to you too as grad students is that the graduate school has this same structure. So you're admitted to the graduate school, and we have a graduate kind of officer here, that's Dr. Friedman, and Stephanie's been helping her in the graduate coordinator role. There's also a college graduate office, and then there's a campus and a university graduate office. So that I find also another layer of bureaucracy. But it says something about the structure of IU, which is that it's a very decentralized system. That decentralization also takes the form of budgetary decentralization. IU is called an RCM institution. RCM has is an acronym that means responsibility-centered management. And what that really means is that the budget you get depends on the money you bring in. So where do we get money? The university, the campus, the college gets money mainly from student tuition, okay? The vast majority of their money comes from that route. They get some money from the state because we are a state institution. The state legislature gives us some amount of money each year, and trying to predict how much they're going to give us is an ongoing guessing game that we engage in every year or 2 years. The budget is actually a biennium budget. But for us so what that means then for us as a department, and really for you as students who are largely funded through AI-ships, is that our ability to, our budget is set by the college, which is the kind of RCM unit that's relevant to us. The university and campus disperse money according to how many credit hours each unit brings in, okay? And that unit being the college. So then the college turns around and says, oh, anthropology, how many credit hours are you teaching? Credit hours come from the number of students in classes and the amount of credits that that class is worth, okay? So if you've heard us, or some of the more advanced students have heard us talk about the importance of enrollments in classes, that's because it really determines our budget, and it determines how many AI-ships we have to offer, okay? So that's where, right now, what the college allots us is 42 semesters of student academic appointments, or AI, that come in the form of AI-ships. They're all teaching, okay? And again, that number comes from their view of what our credit production is, okay? For lack of that's how they talk about it. And that number can change as they look at our enrollments. If they're going down, that number might go down. If they're going up, that number can go up. So that's why enrollment is really, really important to the department, okay? Because it bears on our ability to fund you all, okay? And note too, if you have an AI-ship or any kind of student academic employment, the college pays your tuition, okay? And so that is instead of, you're enrolled in our classes, but if you're getting funding from the college actually sees that as a cost. So the way they see undergraduates who are paying tuition and the way they see graduate students is a little bit different, because by and large, they are paying the tuition of graduate students, okay? And so if you want to take a course outside of the college, we will, for example, I think Sara Friedman needs to give you kind of permission because the college has to pay, say, SPIA for the tuition that goes along with, that you should be paying for that course, okay? So RCM units make it very difficult for a lot of collaboration. They put up barriers to taking coursework across units, and that is a critique of the RCM model. But that is something mandated by the state, and it's not something that we can change unless the state there's lobbying at the state legislative level for that really fundamental change in how the university is financed. So as I said, the department gets its money from the department gets its money from the college. And again, that depends in part on our credit production. The department has other pots of money too, though. We have donations. We have 2 scholarship funds that are part of those donations. You've heard of the SCOMP. That's used to fund preliminary field work. It funds the lecture series that we just had last week. And it funds a variety of other departmental events and other ways in which we support graduate student research. Okay. We also have an archaeology specific scholarship, the Mary Suzanne Savage Scholarship, which funds, again, uniquely archaeological research in the Americas. And then we have a more general purpose fund called Friends of Anthropology. And probably when you graduate, you'll go on the IU alumni list and you will get repeated requests from the IU Foundation, which manages the donations for donations to IU or to the, we don't ask directly from the department, but they will likely on our behalf. So in terms of my job as chair, quickly, a chair in this department is elected and serves 3 or 4 years. The previous dean really liked a 4-year term. I don't know what this dean thinks. And I will say that it's a job that is quite different from the regular job that faculty do, which is teaching and research, because it adds an administrative, a big administrative component to your work. It really compromises your ability to do research, and you teach less as a result. So I just want to point out that being chair really takes a different skill set, and it's not a skill set that you get much training in graduate school. So if university administration is something you're ever interested in, or if you go into a faculty line, you probably will do some admin at some point. I highly recommend taking on some leadership roles wherever you can to get some experience in what that's like. So it is sometimes difficult to get people to serve in the chair role, again, in part because it really does compromise your ability to do research because it takes a fair amount of time. My primary job is to liaise between members of the department, that's staff, students, and faculty, and higher levels in the institution. So I convey information from the department to the college, I convey information from the college and other units back to the department. So that's kind of my main role, is this kind of conduit. You'll note that if you want, there are many things that will require like a chair's signature, or a chair letter of support if it's a request for something at a higher level in the institution. So that's when you come to me, and I'm quite used to writing those things. So if you need something like that, don't be shy. Just reach out. Again, it's not a problem. It's part of my job. I guess I'm also technically a kind of supervisor of the staff, but really Stephanie Odafer is our office manager, and she kind of oversees what's happening in the office. One thing I want to say as chair, as an elected position, is I'm not a boss. I'm not anyone's boss. That's not how we're structured. I'm a faculty colleague who happens to have some administrative responsibilities at the same time. So it's not, I know this system seems very hierarchical, but the chair system itself is not meant to be that. It is really a kind of lateral position among the faculty, but someone who has some authority in terms of personnel issues. So if there are personnel issues, I am kind of the relevant person to come to about those in my kind of departmental supervisory role. Yeah, I just want to say one other thing, which is that I liaise with AGSA. I had a nice meeting with Eric Johnson, the current AGSA president, yesterday, and kind of I act again as a way of providing some transparency. If he has questions about like how is the department run, what's its structure, how can grad students best get involved, we talked about some of those issues yesterday. We provide funding for AGSA as well for when you put on your annual symposium. And so those requests would come through me and through Stephanie. So again, I'm happy. That's a role I enjoy and certainly want to support AGSA. Just one other piece of the department structure, there's also an executive committee that's elected. And so big personnel issues sometimes are taken on also by the executive committee. This year, they're revising our promotion and tenure guidelines, for example. So that's the structure of the department. I know I've talked a little while. I can talk about the AI funding a little later in the Q&A if you'd prefer, or I can continue now. Tori, which would you prefer?
Why don't you touch on it generally now, and more specific questions we can get to in the Q&A.
perfect. Okay. So you know, this is a very good question. How do AI ships get awarded? So AIs are one category of the larger category of what are called SAA ships. Sorry for the acronyms, Student Academic Appointment. Almost all of our SAA ships in this department are AIs. They're teaching, okay? And so first of all, the first criterion we use to assign those is what is the commitment we made to you in your admissions letter. Each admissions letter will lay out, we have provided you with X years of funding, and that funding will take the form of AI ships, okay? So those are the commitments that come first because we have made that commitment to you and we will honor it, of course. So our first kind of layer is to fund everyone who we have a commitment to. Then there will be in February, usually, a requests for funding that goes out from Jen Robinson, who is our current chair of the AI committee. And if you are not on commitment still, but would like funding in the form of an AI ship, you send it, you basically fill out the application and you send it in. And I believe in that application, you can choose, you can say, I'm particularly interested in these classes, to give us some sense of you know, what might be a good fit for you in terms of classes if there's something available. And there is an AI committee that does this, and it has representation across the 4 subfields, and that's typical of our committee structure in this department. And so once we get all those, we try and fund everyone who requests money, but we often can't. We have, over the past year, as our cohort sizes have gotten smaller, actually found ourselves in the position of not being able to cover all of our AI ships, and some people have had to do overload. So we've had extra funding even after we were able to fund everyone. Different classes have different needs. And so one of the things we try and do when we look at that pool of students who want funding who are not under commitment is a good match. Okay, do you, is this an area of, you know, is the topic of the course going to be a good fit with your skill set, right? Or with your interests, what you're studying here. So it depends on a match, it depends on availability, it depends on experience in some cases. And I do want to emphasize that there are changes often right up to the first week of classes, because students who may have signed a contract saying, yes, I'm going to take the departmental offer to teach ANTHB 200, suddenly get an offer from the human biology program. And so they take it because it's a good, better match for them. If it's from like biology, they'll get a lot more money. And so those are the kinds of things that come up every semester and that lead to some last minute changes, which I know can be very distressing or destabilizing for students if they thought they were going to be teaching one thing and suddenly they find themselves teaching something else. And we hate doing that, but it happens. Again, even after students have signed the contract, they are in fact free to take something else if something else comes up that is a better fit for them as they see it. I will say one other thing about this summer is a whole different world in terms of funding. There'll be a call out probably in February as well if you want to teach a summer course. We have a very limited number of courses that are offered then, but they are all AI led. And so this is an opportunity for you to teach your own course. There are very limited numbers of courses that are actually of your own design. Most of them are like ANTHB 200 or A122, but you are teaching it on your own. You can design the syllabus as you see fit. And we typically, you know, have you work with a faculty sponsor just for another set of eyes and some advice on what you're doing. So that's what I have to say about AI funding. Happy to answer any questions as we move along.
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Wiley. We do have one question regarding the summer courses that AIs can teach. I think I'll hold on to that, put a pin in that, and save that for question and answer. We'll get back to that. So we'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Sara Friedman, who will discuss her role as Director of Graduate Studies, and then touch on some information on coursework requirements and credits.
Hello, everyone. So I will start off by saying I am new to this role as of July 1st. So I ask you to bear with me and with Stephanie as we are learning the ropes. We can always turn to Stacy King, who was the previous DGS, but she's also on leave this semester. So we're trying to protect her time as well. So sometimes I don't always know the answer to your questions, but I will do my best to find out. So the Director of Graduate Studies role, what is it? What does it mean? And what do I do for you, really, are the main questions. So unlike the chair, which is an elected position, the DGS, I guess, is an appointed position, meaning someone in the department, usually the chair or the executive committee, comes to you and says, is this something you'd be interested in doing? Or it might be something that's floated in front of the whole faculty to see if there are several people who want to do it. It also is a term-based appointment for 3 years, I believe. And it comes with 1 course reduction. But it also, you know, as with the chair position, requires a significant learning curve because despite having advised graduate students and taught graduate students for many, many years, there's a whole world behind the scenes that you don't see unless you have to see it. So there's a lot to learn. And it also involves working closely with the college graduate office, right, which is within the College of Arts and Sciences, and the university graduate school, right? And to try to figure out, therefore, what you go to which entity for. So that's where I fit sort of structurally. I will say that I am happy to be your first stop for all sorts of questions and concerns. I think there's a belief maybe or an assumption that I'm the person you go to if you have some kind of administrative matter. But in fact, I am the person you go to for all kinds of concerns about your graduate program and progress, right? And that could involve concerns about your committee or your relationship with your advisor or with peers in the program. It could be talking through obstacles you're facing in coming up with a research proposal, or struggles you're facing in balancing, you know, work-life demands, especially now, right? So I'm not, obviously I'm someone who is tasked with trying to keep all of the graduate students on track, right? In a sort of general sense, helping you all move through the program and meeting the requirements at all of the various stages. But I'm also here as a support system for you, right? So you should feel free to come to me with concerns and questions. I am another person in the department who is there for you as a resource, I would say. And then I will also add that the needs you might have at different stages could be different. And so the roles I might fulfill will also be different depending on your stage in the program. So we tend to distinguish between students who are pre-quals, pre-qualifying exams, and students who are post-quals. And that's arbitrarily also how we've divided up the professionalization workshop. So pre-quals, the assumption is you're primarily focused on your coursework, right? And you're making decisions about what courses to take, how do I fulfill the requirements of the program, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. How do I put together a committee, right? How do I begin the process of gradually narrowing my interest to develop a viable dissertation topic, right? What do I do with my summers? How do I support myself during the summer? All of these things are part of these first 3 years. And it's challenging, right? It's hard. If academia were easy, a lot more people would do it. But again, I am here as a resource for you if you have questions about any of those things. I know for those of you who are in your first year in the program, when we met with you individually and as a group, we threw a lot of information at you, right? And I know it's easy to forget that. And by the time, especially you're a second or third year, you don't remember. So where do you go to refresh your memory of those things, right? And sometimes, I will be honest, your advisors don't remember either, right? So a good first sort of, what's the term, like all-in-one shopping venture location is the graduate guide. And you find that on the Anthropology department website. And in fact, Tori, do you think I can screen share?
I think you should be able to.
Okay.
Oh, here, let me
try. It's showing that I can. So let's see. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to just share my screen with you all just to walk you through it. So are you all seeing the Department of Anthropology web page? Yeah? Okay, good. So all you do is type in Anthropology Indiana. This is what comes up. You can go here in the upper right-hand corner to Student Portal, and you click, okay, handle the business of being a student. Then you click on Graduate Anthropology Students, okay. And then you click here, Departmental Guide for Graduate Students. I'm not gonna click on this, I'm just gonna take you to it, although I wonder if that will work. Maybe not, I might have to do this. Let's see, it will download, and then you open it. Okay, are you all seeing that now, the grad guide? Okay, so this is updated every year. We just updated it in August. You are held to the grad guide that was in place the year you entered the program. So because the grad guide will change, yeah, you know, and it could possibly be that the changes are substantive, the requirements for the program, you always know which version you are held to. So what I would suggest is you download this and you save it. I mean, the department has the prior versions, rest assured. And you can always go back and find them. But this is where you go to find resources on campus, general university guidelines, and then anthropology specific details, right? So this is a great first step, right? It goes through the requirements of each of the subfields, talks about concentrations, talks about some outside minors, and the mentoring guidelines are also there at the very end. So this should be your first step with a question. Now, it might not always answer the question or in a way that you're confident you fully understand, and that's a perfect time to come to me to ask for clarification. I will say, in terms of requirements specific, and I'm not going to go through all of these here, but there are some significant subfield requirements differences, right, around language or special skills, for instance, or whether you need, how you meet expectations that you take courses in other subfields within the department, right? So those are going to vary, and you'll want to go to the grad guide to get specific details about what is required, right? So on the one hand, as you're putting together your lists of courses over the years, you want to make sure that you're meeting the requirements for your subfield in anthropology, right? You also will need an outside minor. That is a requirement of the graduate school, right? And in different subfields, outside minors look really different, right? And there's a whole range of possibilities there. And that's something you talk about with your advisor, but you can also talk with me about possibilities as well. And then usually you'll fulfill those outside minor requirements as part of doing your coursework over the first 3 years. Now, I'm saying all this as if you are a student who is starting de novo in your first year, right? Now, those of you who've come in with a master's degree in anthropology or related field and you've transferred in credits, we can talk about how you're going to ultimately apply those credits. Some of them might satisfy some of these requirements, although outside minors, maybe not, right? Those departments might say, you can only use courses taken in our department to count towards the outside minor, right? There are various kinds of restrictions there. But this is a good place to go to, the grad guide, to just first say, okay, what are the language requirements for my subfield? What are the internal distribution requirements for my subfield? How do I meet those? How do I think about my outside minor, etc. And then what are the benchmarks I'm hoping to achieve, right? So first, end of first year to have a committee put together, that's pretty fast. Typically by the beginning of your second year though, or at the latest by the end of your second year, you want to have a committee in place. And for the qualifying exams, your committee only has to be 3 people from within Anthro. And then ideally, if you have an outside minor, you want someone to be represented on the committee, a 4th person from the outside minor. I understand that in our current distance conditions, it's hard to meet faculty and it's hard to have those kinds of casual conversations that will help you figure out, is this person someone I can get along with? Is this person going to be supportive and help me in the ways I need help to progress toward my degree? You can try to reach out, everybody is still holding office hours. You might send an email, say you want to talk. You see some shared research interests, you want to talk about your own possible directions and see whether that would be helpful. Just briefly, there was a question that was posed in advance about grant availability and then the 90 credits. I'm going to talk about the 90 credits first. This is something that you need to graduate. So when you file your dissertation, you want to graduate, you need 90 credits in your major. And there are certain kinds of classes that don't count to those 90 credits. So you need 60 credits when you're advancing to candidacy. And you need 90 to graduate. And in those 90 are not counted things like language classes or special skills, right? You want to do GIS, for instance, or statistics. Those don't count. Your classes that apply to your outside minor also do not count towards the 90 credits. After you advance to candidacy and you start taking G901, which is a much lower fee structure for post-qual students, G901 does not count towards the 90 credits. So these are just some things to keep in mind. And if you ever have questions about your credits, you can go to Stephanie or to me and we can look at your transcript and talk through where you stand. But the graduate school will review those when you are applying for candidacy, and they will tell you where you stand in the 60 to 90 range. So you also have an idea, right? And then finally about funding. So we talked a little bit about SCOMP, and I can answer more questions about this, which is departmental level funding. There are college grad office funding. I sent out an email about that just a few weeks ago about an array of grants. There's some funding sometimes from the University Graduate School. There's funding from something called OVPIA, the Office of the Vice President for for international affairs, I think, for things like international travel grants. Many of the centers on campus also offer travel or research grants for graduate students. So regionally based, area studies based centers or other kinds of research centers often have these. So again, every student's situation is different in terms of what they're eligible to apply for based on their own areas of research interest and expertise. But you'll want to cast a wide net. And we're going to be talking about these options in more detail in an upcoming session in the spring, right? And it'll look different for pre-quals than for those post-quals who are applying for dissertation funding, right? So again, there too, there's a little bit of a gap. I'm going to stop now because I can see I've talked too long and you probably all have lots of questions. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it back to Tori.
All right, great, thank you. That's Dr. Friedman's right. It's a lot of information, but it's a lot of really important information. So luckily we have our session recorded. So if you need to come back and re-listen to some of this information, you can. Obviously, she's also available to speak to. We are going to move on to Mackenzie Cory, our graduate student facilitator. If you do have questions about what Dr. Friedman just discussed and you want to send them in the chat and we can keep record of them for our last small portion of Q&A, you are free to do so. So I'll turn it over to Mac and he can share a little bit about the personal experience of navigating the program.
Hey, so I am a sixth year in the program at this point, and yeah, I guess I've been here a while and I feel, been fairly successful during my time here. And I think one of the key things that comes down to is really shifting, kind of early on, I shifted my thought away from being a graduate student to a graduate apprentice. I feel like a lot of times just thinking of yourself as a student can it can put you into a box where you feel as though there's just certain things that you need to get done with, certain things that are just like stepping stones on the way to a degree, when that's not the ultimate goal of a graduate program. The ultimate goal of a graduate program is the creation of a professional. And really, it's up to you to determine what kind of professional that's going to be. So I'd say around the time of your second year, start asking yourself, what really do I want to do with this degree? Do I want to go into academia? Do I want to go into an NGO? Do I want to work for a governmental entity? If so, start tailoring your coursework to gain the skills that you need to be a good job candidate, to be good at that career path that you want to take. So I think for me, that's one of the key things to remember when looking at what courses you're going to take, what projects you're going to be involved with. I'm also just trying to run through real quick so we can get to questions. Another thing is maintaining a good relationship with your advisor. I know my advisor is Dr. King. She and I email back and forth about once a month, meet up in person once or twice a semester. She gives me a fair amount of space, but that's because that's what I'm looking for in an advisor, someone to kind of keep me on the right track, let me know when I'm not doing what I should be doing, and then kind of really read through the things I write. But for other people, it might mean bi-weekly meetings with your advisor. It all depends on what you're looking for. The most important thing that you can do with them is when you're looking at that annual checklist that Dr. Friedman was talking about, actually sit down and go through once a semester what exactly you are doing to fulfill requirements on that checklist, because you still have to check those boxes to get the degree at the end of the day. But make that a conversation, and make that conversation where it's not just I'm getting these things done, but I've chosen these things because they contribute towards this goal or this skill set. As far as maximizing coursework goes, it's kind of a double-edged sword because you can take what you can take, right? It's not as though it's not as though there's magically going to be more graduate courses offered halfway through the semester that really appeal to your direct interests. But I found that a lot of the faculty in the department, especially for graduate level courses, if you start talking to them early, you can kind of work with them to develop final projects that do work to meet your goals. For some professors, that might mean you just working with a certain kind of database, writing a paper about it. For others, it might mean more of a service learning project or a hands-on project, depending on what you want to get out of it. As far as workload goes, I am a firm believer that if you are working more than 60 hours a week, twice a semester, or 2 weeks a semester, you are doing it wrong. There needs to be a work-life balance. There will be times where you have to cram, but I'm a big fan of working smarter and not harder. Where for me, when I'm sitting down to work, I am usually at my desk for 6 to 8 hours at a time, diving into a task and just focusing on it for that amount of time. I have one playlist that I made 2 years ago. It's 14 hours long. I put it on, I listen to it, and I don't change the music. It's just there to be background and to block out other noises. I don't watch TV. My email will be closed. Honestly, if it's something that important, people know my phone number and can call me. But I'm not checking the news. I'm not checking my phone. Again, no TV. I don't understand how people have the TV on while working. And I'll read beforehand. So if I'm working on a project where I have new citations that I'm working with, I'll do my reading one day and my writing the next, not jumping back and forth unless I just need to go back and find a certain quote or check on the page number. But really devoting time to the task at hand, and I still probably do 50 hours a week, but I don't work Saturdays. And that's been really wonderful since I started doing that. And again, there are exceptions. You'll get down to finals time where you have 4 papers due all at the exact same time that you've somehow fallen behind on all of them. That's going to be a longer week. Let's see. Get involved at conferences early. These are going to be, one, you'll get to know other peers in the field. I have excellent relationships with other people in the Northwest Plains Archaeology graduate student community. Because I've been going to Plains Conference for a while, and I have colleagues that I've known since we were both undergrads, and I have colleagues that I've met this last year. But also when you're going to conferences, enter into paper competitions, enter into poster competitions, get the chance to engage with those people who are going to be judges, and oftentimes are journal editors. Oftentimes are senior scholars from other institutions that it's good to have some rapport with. And let's see. And then tap into university resources early. I know for me personally, this summer I just started working a job at the Mathers Museum because they were shorthanded during their move. And it's an institution that I wish I had gotten involved with 3 years ago. I always thought because I'm an archaeologist, they're more kind of cultural studies, that it's what they have isn't applicable to me. But it turns out that just building in that extra skill set, being able to really understand in depth how a museum registration system works, that's big, and it opens up job opportunities for me. And there are dozens of these centers across campus that focus on studying different parts of the world, studying kind of different paradigms of thought. There is the College Arts and Humanities Institute, which brings in some really, really amazing speakers and also gives out some pretty amazing grants. All of these things all of these centers are places that you should be looking at working with, probably starting around your second year, getting to know these people. And again, it's like, the more you talk to people, the more doors that you have open. I met a professor over in geology while digging holes in Montana, and started working on a project with him, just making some maps for him. That's now my funding, is a research assistantship through Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, because I met someone digging holes. So it never hurts just to talk and get to know people. If Della gives you feedback, don't blow it off. She usually gives excellent feedback, and get on her good side, and she tends to be pretty good at introducing you to other faculty members that she thinks would fit well with your research. And let's see, it's 48, so I've tried to catch us up a little bit on time, and I'll hand it back to you, Tori.
Thank you, Mac. So Mac actually mentioned a couple different campus centers that are good for finding mentorship and getting connected for collaborations, but also offer small grants. So I'm going to compile all the sources that we've put in the chat into a Google Doc, and I'll add some of the centers and resources that Mac mentioned while he was talking. So I do want to give us some time. This is all valuable and important information, but I'm sure you have some questions. So we have some that were submitted beforehand, and I'll pull a couple from those. But if you have anything from what you've heard during the session specifically that you need clarification on, please don't hesitate to drop that in the chat. You can send that to me privately to ask anonymously. But I'm going to start with a question about funds. So does our department offer funds to support student publishing?
The short answer is no. We don't have dedicated funding for that. The campus, through the library and the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, maintains a publication fund. It's, I believe, only available to faculty, but if you're co-authoring something with a faculty member, you can use that, and they pay up to $1,000 a year to offset often open access charges, and that's how I've used it. So we don't have a mechanism for that, but if you do find yourself in a situation where you need those things, bring that to our attention, talk to your advisor, and depending on the nature of it, and if this is a common request, we can think about budgeting something like that. But right now we don't have a mechanism beyond that OVPR mechanism.
Great, thank you. So another question is, if you take an AI position with another department for a semester, does that void your admission offer in your admission letter for other semesters?
So the answer, the word void is probably not quite the one we want to use. It will substitute for one of those. So if it's another unit in the college, because the college is paying this essentially, they consider that part of the college's commitment to you that we outlined in the admissions letter. If it's outside of the college, then we might have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of whether that would count for one of the semesters of your guaranteed funding.
Any follow-up questions regarding that? I know that is something that possibly a good number of students might experience, finding positions in other departments. I know Dr. Wiley mentioned earlier that some students get offers from possibly the biology department, which will give a higher stipend than within the department, and students will take that instead. So any other questions regarding?
Can I just clarify one thing? Because
Yes.
I think students might be, especially newer students, might be a little confused about this. So the college has gone through a little bit of a restructuring, and so you'll see that there is the College of Arts and Sciences and departments that are only in the College of Arts and Sciences, like Anthropology, for instance. And then there are schools within the college. For instance, the Media School, what's now called the Hamilton Luger School, Global and International Studies, I forget what they called it, the Architecture Design School, maybe they called it, I'm not sure. So these are schools that house departments, many of which originally were only in the college. Some not, like the media school brought in journalism, which was its own separate school originally. But in any case, even if you were AIing, for instance, in the media school or in HLS, from the college perspective, I think that would still count, Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, as being within the college. It would really only be if you were AIing in informatics or SPIA or Kelly or the ed school or the law school, something like that, that's really a separate entity outside of the college that we could possibly make an argument.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Friedman, that's helpful. Can students request to gain teaching experience outside of their subfield?
Absolutely. We'd like to encourage that, actually. And this has been a kind of ongoing discussion, in part because we often find ourselves short on students trained in biological anthropology to teach, for example, Anth B200, or for example, A107, which is a kind of archaeology bio-anth hybrid course. So we very much want, and I would say encourage people to get some cross-training in this way. And I think, for example, this semester, Kevin is working for Della Cook in her college class on Darwinian or evolutionary nutrition or evolutionary diets. And so there's an example of where, you might get an AI assignment that is in a field that is perhaps a little far afield from your own expertise, but gives you some experience and exposure, because the subfield requirements in our program are fairly subfield specific. Opportunities to broaden your training are, from a curricular perspective, a little more limited, and it's something I would like to, and I talked about this with Eric a little bit yesterday, about how to solve this problem, and how to perhaps get more students interested in AIing in bioanthropology, for example. That just happens to be an example of a place where we need more teaching right now.
So this question has kind of two parts. Maybe Mac, you can address the first. When should we start applying for grants/fellowships?
I would say it depends on the grant and fellowship. The big thing is working with your advisor, because it's a process. I generally go through about 6 drafts before getting to any grant or fellowship application. So there's nothing wrong with starting early. I applied for a grant my first month and a half here and got hammered by the reviewers. But it ultimately made my research plan significantly better and kind of put me on the right track to the research I'm doing now. So apply early, but make sure that you have an advisor or mentor who has the time to kind of help you through that process, because it is arduous. And be prepared to fail several times, and keep on applying. I mean, I didn't get Wen or Gren this cycle. I was 0.2 points off, and I'm submitting another application here in a month. It's the only way to do it.
And can I just jump in briefly here? I think also, again, this is going to really depend on your stage, and it's going to depend on your research methodology and orientation and the skills that you need. So, typically in your first year, there might be things that you're applying for the academic year, but more commonly you would be applying for funding for the summer, right? And what are you going to do with the summer? Are you applying for support to do intensive language study? Are you applying for a travel/research grant to begin doing preliminary field work? Everybody has different needs, right? And different skills or steps that they need to go through to progress in the program. So that process of grant application is going to look different. However, I wholeheartedly endorse Mac's point that it's never too early to start. And I firmly believe that grants beget grants, right? That you have to learn how to write them. They're not easy. But as you do learn and it becomes a more comfortable process, by the time you get to the stage of someone, you know, in Mac's position where you're applying for a big research grant for your dissertation research, it feels more comfortable and you know how to put together the pieces so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
And
but little baby steps along the way are really important.
And look at the college, look at the different institutes, and the Grad Grant Center is a great resource to use, especially those $1,000 to $2,000 grants oftentimes only require 2,500, 3,000 words of writing at most, which it sets you up for those big grants while still not being a massive time suck.
I know Dr. Wiley has to head out for another Zoom meeting, which I think we all can relate to, Zoom on Zoom. So thank you, Dr. Wiley, for being with us. I did want to ask, so just kind of one final question before we wrap up. First, Dr. Friedman, Mac, would you say SCOMP is a good place to start for first, second year students that are looking to get their feet wet, applying for grants and doing feasibility work during the summer months?
I would say SCOMP is a great place to start, but again, it will also depend, you know, for students in your first year, you're guaranteeing one SCOMP as part of your package. So maybe you don't want to use it in your first summer where you're not quite sure. And maybe something else is more useful. Like maybe you want to go do a language program somewhere and then do some exploratory research as part of that, right? So then, and again here, citizenship status will have some influence, but IU is very fortunate that we have, I think, the largest number of centers of any university in the US in terms of receiving what's called FLAS funding, Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowships. They are limited to citizens or green card holders. So there are some restrictions there, but they fund summer language study, and they also fund they provide academic year fellowships as well. So if you're having to learn a new language or significantly enhance language skills that you already have, chances are one of the centers, area study centers at IU has FLAS in that area, and that's something definitely to think about. Also, academic exchange programs. IU also has quite a number of those as well. That can be another way to kind of get your foot in the door, get you someplace with travel covered and a living expense, and do some field work on the side. So SCOMP isn't always the first one. Also, these centers, a lot of them have travel grants that are also easy, good steps to apply for.
And I would say don't apply for SCOMP until after you've taken research design with Professor King and Professor Brandizio. That will really help to kind of clarify your research design so you're making the most out of that time, because $3,000 is a lot of money. It's a big grant, and I've run into it where I've gotten to my field area and I've had 2 days to completely shift gears as to what I want to do with it. So it's a good idea to know exactly what kind of data you need in a broad sense, instead of applying for SCOMP to kind of do a narrow test.
Okay, I'm also looking here at another question. So when should we start applying for grants, fellowships? And again, we're not talking always about the same sort of thing. Tori, sorry, I thought you were gesturing towards me.
Oh, no, that was that was a repeat question at
Oh,
the one
okay.
below about Mac mentioned when or Gren.
Right.
If you receive
So,
a grant.
right. So a large grant, which in most cases you won't apply for until you're about to do your own dissertation research. So this is something ideally, to not have interrupted time, you would apply for in the fall of your third year. A lot of the deadlines are in the fall, but some also have spring or summer deadlines, so it varies a little bit. So your third year would be when you applied so that you could start doing your research in your fourth year. Anthropology department funding assumes, requires to a certain extent, that you will get outside funding to support your dissertation research. So that's already built into your package. It's not counting against anything. So the assumption of our packages that we offer is that you will have a year in them, at least a year, or some length of time in the middle there, where you're supporting yourself with an outside external grant or fellowship to conduct your dissertation research.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. I know we're 3 minutes over time, so I apologize for keeping those of you who have to run to something else. I do want to let you know that the recording of this will be available, and I will send out a Google Doc with the links to the various resources and information that was shared during the session.
And let me just say very quickly, Tori's going to share a link to departmental forms, which is, again, if you go through that student portal and you scroll down to forms and other useful links, it will take you to an annual review guide for each subfield. And that is, if you go to departmental form, it takes a little bit of a way to get there, unfortunately. There's a student annual checklist, and it's broken down by subfield. And you should be taking that every year to your chair, your advisor, with what you've completed, filled out, and with a plan for talking about what you still have to do. So Tori's going to provide a link to that in the resources, and that's really helpful, I think, to help you plan forward.
Yes, yeah. Very essential. So I'll give you a direct link so you don't have to find it on the website. Definitely take it to your mentor each year, and we will talk more about mentorship at our November 16th session. So you can be thinking about questions that you might have about mentorship for then. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Happy October. Enjoy the weather and the weekend.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see.
You are
Mackenzie.
still recording.
There are two Mackenzies here, so let me stop